My boyfriend said he wasn't going to be with me anymore and that it was over, but he still wanted to keep living with me. My mother has a talent for calling right when I'm trying to pretend my life is calm. Like, not even busy, just calm. That fragile kind of calm where you're sitting on your couch with your laptop balanced on your knees, telling yourself you're a functional adult because you paid your electric bill before the due date. That was me. On a Tuesday night, in my small apartment in a regular, boring city in the United States, wearing sweatpants that had seen better decades. When my phone lit up with, I didn't pick up right away. I stared at it like the screen was going to blink first. It didn't. I knew that if I answered, I was going to hear either a complaint disguised as concern or a demand disguised as a suggestion. I also knew I'd answer anyway, because apparently I'm allergic to peace. "Hey," I said, trying to sound normal. "Hi, honey," my mother said, and that tone was already loaded. "Are you home?" "I'm home," I said. "What's going on?" "Nothing's going on," she replied, which is always when something is going on. "I just wanted to see if you and your boyfriend are coming for dinner this weekend." My stomach did that little drop thing, because dinner at my parents' house wasn't dinner. Dinner was a courtroom with potatoes. "Maybe," I said. "I have work stuff." "You always have work stuff," she said. "You're always working. It's not healthy." This from the woman who thinks resting is a moral failure. I rubbed my forehead. "I'll see." "Good," she said brightly, and I could hear her smiling through the phone, which somehow made it worse. "Bring him. Your father likes him." "Of course he does." Here's the thing about my family. My father loves people who make him feel respected, and my mother loves people she can show off. I've never been particularly good at being either of those things, mostly because I'm their daughter, and they've already decided what I am. But my boyfriend? He walked into their house 2 years ago, sat up straight, asked my father questions about his job like it mattered, and complimented my mother's cooking like it was a 5-star meal. He didn't even try hard. He just had that smooth confidence that makes older adults think they're looking at a good man. His name doesn't matter here because honestly, it stopped feeling like it belonged to an actual person and started feeling like a role. The charming one, the reasonable one, the one everyone believed. I'm going to call him my boyfriend because that's what he was, and also because every time I say his actual name in my head, I still get that hot, embarrassed anger behind my eyes. When I met him, he had a steady job at a creative office, the kind where people wore nice shoes and talked about campaigns like they were saving the world. He had his own place, paid his bills, and didn't ask me for anything except my time. I liked that. I liked that he didn't need me. I know. File that under things I didn't realize would become ironic. I work in software, which sounds fancy when people say it out loud, but in real life it's just me staring at screens, fixing things nobody notices until they break, and trying not to scream during meetings where someone says, "Can we just make it pop?" Like that's a helpful instruction. I make decent money, enough to rent a place alone, have a little savings, and buy the occasional overpriced coffee when I'm too tired to function. I'm not rich, but I'm not drowning either, and that made me feel safer than I'd ever felt growing up under my mother's moods. 2 years into dating him, I thought I was doing the adult thing. Stable job, stable relationship, my own place, boundaries with my family. Weak boundaries, but still. I thought I was building a life that didn't depend on anyone else's mood swings. And then, because life has a sense of humor, he got laid off. He showed up at my door the day it happened with that stunned look people get when they realize the ground actually can disappear under them. He sat at my kitchen counter and stared at nothing while I made tea, because I'm apparently a walking cliché when someone is upset. "It's fine," he kept saying. "It's fine. I'll figure it out." I believed him. Not because I'm naive exactly, but because he'd always figured things out before. He'd always been the calm one, the one who had a plan, and I wanted to be supportive. I wanted to be the girlfriend who didn't panic, who didn't make someone else's crisis about her. Spoiler, it became about me anyway. A few weeks later, he floated the idea of staying with me temporarily, just until he got back on his feet, just until he didn't feel like he was burning through his savings. He said it like he was asking, but he was already halfway moved in emotionally, like the decision had already been made and I was just catching up. I said yes, because I loved him, and because I didn't want to be the kind of person who says no to someone she's been sharing a life with for 2 years. Also because, if I'm being honest, I liked the idea of him being there all the time. I liked waking up and not having to check my phone to see if he'd texted. I liked the illusion of a shared home. The first couple months were fine. He threw in money for groceries. He covered his share of the utilities without me having to ask. He cooked sometimes. He made jokes about how my couch was now ours. which was cute then. In that harmless way, things are cute before they become a warning sign. My parents loved it. My mother heard he moved in and immediately started talking like a wedding was imminent. My father started calling him son, in that half-joking way that wasn't actually a joke. My older sister rolled her eyes and said, "Finally," like I'd been dragging my feet on purpose. And my younger brother, who has never met an opportunity to avoid responsibility that he didn't like, started dropping comments about how it must be nice to have someone paying half your bills. I should tell you now that my brother has been my parents' ongoing project. Their excuse. Their eternal, he just needs time. He's the one who has potential. I'm the one who is independent anyway. That dynamic has been consistent since we were kids. If he messed up, it was a learning experience. If I messed up, it was proof I was ungrateful. So when he started hinting about money, I ignored it at first, because I was exhausted, and also because ignoring my brother is basically self-care. But my boyfriend staying with me started to shift things in subtle ways. His savings lasted longer than I expected, but the job search dragged on. He didn't get calls back as quickly. He'd complain about lowball offers and people not recognizing his talent. At first, I nodded and said supportive things, because again, supportive girlfriend. And then months passed, and I started noticing that my bank balance was shrinking faster than it should. It wasn't one big expense. It was 1,000 little ones, the kind you don't notice until you look at your account and feel your stomach twist. My grocery trips got more expensive because he had specific preferences. He liked snacks I never bought for myself. He started asking me to add him to my phone plan because it'll be cheaper. He asked if I could put his car on my insurance because mine is ridiculous right now. And every time, he said it like it was logical, like it was a favor to both of us, like I should be grateful he was letting me save money while I paid more. I did it. I did all of it. Yes, I can hear you judging me. Judge away. I'm judging me too. I told myself it was temporary. I told myself couples support each other. I told myself he'd do the same for me. And maybe, in another universe, he would have. In this one, he got comfortable. The turning point wasn't even some dramatic fight. It was a random Thursday when I came home late, brain fried from work, and he was on the couch playing a game on my console like he'd been doing it all day. There were dishes in the sink. The trash was full. He looked up and said, "Hey, can you order dinner? I'm starving." I stood there holding my work bag, still wearing my badge, still half in work mode, and it hit me like a slap that he hadn't asked how my day was, hadn't offered to cook, hadn't even considered that maybe I didn't want to spend more money on takeout. He just expected it, and something in me went cold. "Can you order it?" I asked. He shrugged. "I don't have my card on that app." Because he'd let it expire and never updated it. Because, of course. I stared at him. He didn't notice. He was already back to his game. That night I ordered dinner anyway, because I was too tired to fight. But I ate quietly, and I watched him like I'd never watched him before, like I was seeing him as a stranger in my living room. And I hated the thought that my mother would call this a blessing, like me paying for everything was proof of love. The next weekend, we went to my parents' house for dinner because my mother wouldn't stop pushing. The whole night was this weird performance where my boyfriend was charming and helpful, and my parents were glowing like they'd adopted him. My mother kept making comments about how nice it is when a man knows how to take care of a woman, which was hilarious in a way that made my jaw hurt from clenching. My father asked him about his job search with this sympathetic seriousness, like he was talking to a son who deserved patience. After dessert, my brother cornered me in the kitchen while everyone else was laughing in the living room. He leaned against the counter like he was in a movie and said, "So, how's it going, Miss Fancy Job?" "I'm tired," I said, because that was the truth and also the only thing I could say without starting a war. He smirked. "Must be nice, though. You're doing good. You could help me out." "With what?" I asked, already knowing. "My rent's going up," he said. "And my car needs work." "You have a job," I reminded him. "Yeah, but it's not enough," he said, and his eyes flicked toward the living room like he expected my parents to appear and back him up. "Come on. You don't even have kids. You have 2 incomes now." I laughed, but it came out sharp. "I have 1 income." He frowned like he didn't understand the math. "Your boyfriend lives with you." "Exactly," I said. "He lives with me." My brother rolled his eyes. "You're being difficult." That word. The family go-to for, you have emotions we don't want to deal with. I wanted to scream. Instead, I walked back into the living room with a smile that probably looked like a hostage situation. Later that night, in the car, my boyfriend said, Your family is intense, but they love you. I stared at the road and said, do they? He reached over like he was going to hold my hand, and I let him, because I wasn't ready to admit out loud that I felt alone even with him sitting next to me. A couple weeks after that, he started acting like my apartment was his stage. He'd invite friends over without asking me, and then tell me last minute like it was a cute surprise. He'd ask me to make reservations for dinners he was going to without me, because apparently my ability to click buttons on my phone was now a service I provided. He'd talk about our budget like he was contributing to it, which would have been funny if it wasn't making me want to throw my phone across the room. I kept swallowing it, because I didn't want to be the nagging girlfriend, and also because I didn't know how to admit that I'd allowed this to happen. I'd built this whole identity around being competent, being independent, being the one who didn't need help. So admitting I was being used felt like admitting I was stupid. And I hate feeling stupid. Then came the night that cracked everything open. We were sitting on the couch watching some mindless show, the kind you put on because your brain can't handle anything heavy. He muted it and said, "Can we talk?" My heart did that stupid hopeful thing for half a second, because my brain is always trying to make things nicer than they are. "Sure," I said. He took a breath like he'd rehearsed it. "I don't think I'm in love with you anymore." I didn't understand the sentence at first. Like the words went into my ears and my brain just stalled. I blinked at him. "What?" "I care about you," he said quickly, like he was handing me a consolation prize. "I love you as a person. I just don't feel romantic love." I stared at him, and my first thought was, weirdly, about the groceries, about the bills, about the fact that I'd been paying for his temporary life for months. My second thought was that he looked calm, too calm, like he'd already processed my reaction and decided it wouldn't be his problem. Okay, I said, because my mouth had to do something. "So, what are you saying?" He leaned forward, elbows on knees, like he was explaining a reasonable proposal in a meeting. "I don't want things to get messy. We work well as a household. We get along. We could just keep living together as roommates. No pressure, no expectations. It doesn't have to change anything practical." There it was. Practical. Practical for who exactly? For him, obviously, because his roommate would still be the person paying the rent on an apartment he couldn't afford. For me, it would be, what, exactly? A slow death of dignity? I laughed because sometimes your body just picks a reaction and runs with it. "You want me to be your roommate," I said, and my voice sounded weird, like it belonged to someone else. "After I've been your girlfriend, and also your personal finance department." He flinched, which was the first emotion I'd seen from him all night. "That's not fair." "It's not fair?" I repeated, and I could feel something hot building in my chest. "You're telling me you don't love me, but you still want to live here because it's convenient?" He sighed like I was exhausting him. "I'm trying to be honest. I don't want to hurt you." I stared at him. "You already did." He shrugged, and that shrug is burned into my memory like a brand. Not a dramatic shrug, not a villain shrug, just a casual one. Like my pain was an unfortunate side effect, like it wasn't his problem to manage. I couldn't stay in the living room. I went into my bedroom, shut the door, and sat on the edge of my bed, staring at my hands like they belonged to someone else. I wanted to cry, but my body was doing that numb thing, like it was trying to keep me from falling apart. I kept thinking, I pay for his phone. I pay for his insurance. I pay for our food. And he doesn't love me. He doesn't love me. And he's still here. And he wants to stay. At some point, I heard the TV unmute, like he'd gone back to his show. That sound made my eyes finally sting. I cried into my pillow like a teenager, which was humiliating and also weirdly familiar, because my parents' house had trained me to cry quietly so nobody would accuse me of being too sensitive. The next morning, I woke up early because my brain refused to let me sleep, and I went for a walk around the block with my hood up like I was hiding from my own life. It was cold enough that my breath came out in little clouds, and I kept wiping my face like I could erase what happened. I told myself, okay, you're going to handle this like an adult. You're going to talk to him calmly. You're going to figure out logistics. You're not going to spiral. I got back to the apartment and he was in the kitchen making himself coffee, using my mug like nothing had changed. "Morning," he said, cheerful. I stared at him. "Did you sleep okay?" He nodded. "Yeah. You?" "No," I said. I didn't. He frowned like my lack of sleep was inconvenient. "Blythe," he said, and hearing my name from his mouth made my skin crawl. "I really don't want this to become a whole thing." "A whole thing," I repeated. "Like my feelings are a nuisance." He rolled his eyes. "See, this is what I mean. You're making it into a crisis." There it was. like my mother had possessed him. I felt my face flush. You broke up with me, I said, while living in my apartment that I pay for. And now you're annoyed I'm upset. He shrugged. I didn't break up with you. I'm being honest about my feelings. We can still be close. Close, I said, and my voice cracked. Like what? Like friends? He leaned against the counter and looked at me in a way that made my stomach twist. Honestly, he said, you've always been better as a partner at home than as, a woman. I stood there like he'd slapped me. My ears rang. I swear my body went cold from the inside out. What did you just say? I asked, and my voice was so quiet it scared me. He waved his hand like he wanted to erase it. I didn't mean it like that. I just mean you're reliable. You're supportive. You're stable. Oh, I said, and I tasted blood because I'd bitten the inside of my cheek. So I'm stable. Great. Love that for me. I walked into the bathroom and locked the door because if I didn't, I was going to either scream or throw something, and I didn't want to give him the satisfaction of calling me crazy. I sat on the closed toilet lid and cried, wiping my face with toilet paper because I'm classy like that. When I came out, he was on the couch again. Like nothing. Like my breakdown was background noise. And then, because the universe apparently enjoys piling on, I saw the shared tablet on the coffee table light up with messages. I wasn't trying to snoop. It was just there, glowing. My eyes caught a preview. His friends in a group chat, celebrating his honesty and calling him mature. Someone wrote something like, proud of you for setting boundaries. Boundaries. I almost choked. I picked up the tablet with shaking hands and scrolled, because once you see the edge of something like that, you can't not look. They were talking about me like I was an obstacle, like I was a problem he'd handled. One friend asked if I'd take it well. He replied something like, she's upset, but she'll calm down. Like I was a toddler. Like my reaction was weather. I put the tablet down slowly and went into my bedroom, and I didn't cry that time. I just sat there with my hands clenched, feeling something in me harden. It wasn't strength. It wasn't wisdom. It was rage. And underneath it, a sharp, humiliating clarity. He'd planned this. He'd told his friends before telling me. He'd built a narrative where he was noble and I was emotional. And he expected to keep my apartment, my money, my labor, all while detaching from me like I was a coat he didn't want to wear anymore. That night, when he came into the bedroom doorway and asked, so what are we doing? I looked up and said, fine, roommates. And I smiled because I wanted him to think he'd won. He looked relieved. Thank you, he said, and he tried to hug me. I stepped back. Roommates don't hug like that, I said, and my voice was calm enough that I almost impressed myself. He blinked. Okay, he said, like it was odd but acceptable. He went back to the living room, and that's when my petty little plan started. Not because I'm a mastermind, but because I couldn't survive staying in that apartment if I didn't reclaim something. Control, pride, basic dignity, anything. The next morning, I made coffee for myself, and only myself. I didn't announce it. I didn't make a speech. I just poured one cup and walked away. When he came into the kitchen and saw the empty pot, he frowned. You didn't make enough? I made enough for me, I said, and I kept my tone light, like we were co-workers discussing office supplies. He stared. Okay, he said slowly, like he was processing it. At the grocery store that week, I bought my food, my snacks, my cereal, my whatever. I didn't buy his. I left the fancy drinks he liked on the shelf. I skipped the expensive chips he inhaled. When I got home, I put my groceries away neatly and left his side of the pantry empty. He opened the fridge later and said, did you forget something? I got what I needed, I said, and I kept typing on my laptop, because if I looked at his face too long, I might snap. He laughed like I was joking. Blythe, come on. I'm being practical, I said, and that word tasted delicious in my mouth. Within a week, the apartment felt different. Not because I did anything dramatic, but because I stopped doing all the invisible little things that had been holding his life together. I stopped restocking toilet paper. I stopped replacing soap when it ran out. I stopped calling maintenance when the sink dripped. I stopped making his favorite dinners. I stopped smoothing out the edges of our shared space like it was a relationship. He noticed. Of course he noticed. He just didn't like what it implied. One night he asked, are you punishing me? I looked up from my screen. For what? For being honest, he said, and his voice had that wounded tone that made me want to laugh and scream at the same time. I'm doing what you asked, I said. We're roommates. Roommates don't pay each other's bills. He scoffed. You're being petty. I shrugged, and it felt like borrowing his weapon and using it better. You can call it whatever you want. He tried to get cute with it at first. He'd say things like, "Hey, roomie, can you do me a favor?" And I'd smile and say, "No," like it was normal. He'd pout. He'd sigh. He'd act like I was being cruel. I watched him cycle through emotions like a kid testing boundaries, annoyance, guilt trips, attempts at charm. My favorite was when he asked me to make a reservation for a dinner he wanted to have with his friends, and I said, "I'm not your assistant." He blinked like he'd never considered that sentence in his life. "Why are you being like this?" he asked. "Why were you like that?" I shot back, and then I hated myself because I'd broken my calm facade, and I didn't want to give him that satisfaction. So I took a deep breath and said, "I'm being normal. This is normal roommate behavior." He stormed off and slammed a door, which was ironic because it was my door in my apartment. But whatever. A few days later, he realized I'd removed my payment info from the phone plan. I'd warned him, I'd even written it down on a sticky note like he was a child, and he still didn't move his number. So he went out, tried to use data, couldn't, and came home furious. "I couldn't even call a ride," he said, throwing his keys on the counter. "You have legs," I said, because I was done being nice. He glared at me. "This is spite." "This is adulthood," I said. "Get your own plan." He paced, rubbing his hands through his hair like he was the victim of an injustice. "You're acting like I cheated on you." I looked up slowly. "You didn't cheat. You just decided you didn't love me and still wanted my rent money. That's its own kind of betrayal." He opened his mouth, then closed it, because there's no good comeback to that without admitting what he did. Around that time, my mother started texting more. Not about me, really. About him. "How's he doing? Has he found work? Tell him your father is rooting for him." Like he was a project. Like I was just the messenger. I ignored it for a while because I had enough chaos in my apartment, and I didn't want to invite my family into it. But then my mother called again, and when I answered, she launched straight into it. "Your boyfriend sounded upset," she said. My stomach dropped. "He talked to you?" "He called your father," she said like it was normal. "He said you've been cold and unkind." Of course he did. Of course he went to my parents, because he knew they'd side with him. He knew my mother loves a narrative where I'm the problem. I felt my hands shake. "He told you that?" "He's trying," my mother said. "He's been through a lot. Losing a job is hard. You need to be supportive." "I have been supportive," I snapped, and my voice came out louder than I intended. "I've been paying for everything." There was a pause, and I could practically hear my mother recalibrating. "Well," she said, "you make good money. That's what partners do." "He doesn't love me," I said, because I couldn't keep it in anymore. "He told me he doesn't love me. He wants to live here as a roommate." My mother exhaled dramatically, like I was being exhausting. Sometimes men say things when they're stressed. "You're too sensitive. You always take everything personally." I laughed, but it was not a happy laugh. "He literally said he's not in love with me." "And?" she said. "Love changes. Commitment matters. Don't be impulsive." Impulsive. Like my emotions were a character flaw. I felt my chest tighten. "I'm not being impulsive," I said. "I'm being realistic." "You're being stubborn," she corrected. "And selfish." Selfish. The word hit me in that old childhood spot, the place that still flinches when my mother disapproves. I swallowed hard. "Okay," I said quietly. "Thanks for the input. Don't hang up on me," she warned. And I almost laughed again because apparently I'm still 15 in her head. "I have to go," I said. And I hung up anyway. My hands were shaking so hard I almost dropped my phone. I sat on the couch and stared at the wall, feeling that familiar mix of rage and shame. Why does my mother still get to do that to me? Why do I still care? That weekend, my parents insisted we come for dinner, like nothing was wrong. Like my mother hadn't called me selfish. I didn't want to go, but my brain was also like, maybe you should go, maybe you should explain, maybe you should fix it. Because yes, I'm aware that's unhealthy. I'm working on it. Sort of. We went. My boyfriend was cheerful in the car, like he was excited. That should have been my first clue. It wasn't. I'm slow. At my parents' house, my mother greeted him like a hero returning from war. My father clapped him on the back. My sister rolled her eyes at me in that sister way that says, "Why are you making this weird?" My brother was already lounging on the couch like he owned the place because of course he was. Dinner started normal enough, but then my mother cleared her throat and said, "So, we need to talk about what's going on." I felt my stomach drop. "What's going on?" I repeated slowly. My father set down his fork like a judge. Your boyfriend tells us you've been unstable, he said. Unstable. That word made my vision blur for a second. Unstable, I echoed. My boyfriend sat there with his hands folded, looking sympathetic. I didn't say unstable, he said softly, which was technically true because he didn't have to. He just had to imply it. My mother leaned forward. You've always had a temper, she said. You get cold, you shut people out. We've seen it. I felt heat rise up my neck. I'm not shutting people out, I said. I'm setting boundaries. My brother snorted. Here we go, he muttered. My father frowned. Boundaries, he said like it was a foreign word. You live with him. You've built a life. You can't just throw him out because you're upset. I haven't thrown him out, I said, and my voice was shaking now, and I hated that they could hear it. He asked to be roommates. My mother waved her hand. That's just talk. Relationships go through phases. And I went through the phase where I paid for everything. I snapped. For months. I covered his bills. I added him to my insurance. I paid for groceries. And then he told me he didn't love me but still wanted to live off me. So yeah, I stopped doing extra. My father's expression hardened. You're making it about money. It is about money, I said. It's also about respect. My mother's eyes narrowed. Do you hear yourself? You sound bitter. I am bitter, I admitted. Why wouldn't I be? My sister finally spoke up, voice sweet in that fake way. Maybe if you weren't so intense, he wouldn't have felt that way. That did it. Something in me snapped, that thin thread of patience I'd been clinging to. Oh my God, I said, and my voice got loud. So it's my fault he used me? My mother slammed her hand on the table. Lower your voice. No, I said, and I surprised myself with how solid it sounded. I'm done lowering my voice for this family. My father stood up. Don't talk to your mother like that. Then don't talk about me like I'm a problem you need to fix. I shot back, and my hands were shaking so hard my fork rattled against my plate. My boyfriend finally spoke, calm as ever. I didn't want to cause a fight, he said. I just thought maybe your family could help you see you're overreacting. Overreacting. I stared at him and felt my face burn. So you called my parents, I said slowly, to get them to gang up on me. He looked offended. That's not what I meant. It's what you did, I said. My mother pointed at me like I was misbehaving. You see? This is what we mean. You twist everything. I looked around the table and realized something that honestly should have hit me years ago. They weren't listening. They weren't trying to understand. They were trying to keep the story they liked, where I was difficult and everyone else was reasonable. It didn't matter what I said. They'd already decided. So I stood up, grabbed my bag, and said, I'm leaving. My father stepped toward me. Sit down. No, I said, and my voice was shaking but firm. I'm done. My mother's face went pale with anger. If you walk out, don't expect us to fix it later, she said, like she was threatening me with exile. I smiled, and it was not a happy smile. You never fixed anything, I said. I walked out. My boyfriend followed me to the car, hissing, Why would you do that? You embarrassed me. I turned on him and said, You embarrassed me first. He looked stunned, like he'd never seen me choose myself. And for a second, I felt powerful. Then I got in my car and drove home with my hands shaking on the steering wheel, tears streaming down my face, because power doesn't cancel grief. When we got back, the apartment felt like a war zone even though nothing had changed physically. My boyfriend paced, angry, while I sat on the edge of my bed trying to breathe. You can't treat people like that, he said. I can't treat people like that, I repeated, and my voice went sharp. You treated me like a wallet, he scoffed. You're obsessed with finances. Because finances are real, I snapped. Love is not paying my rent, but somehow I've been doing both. He stared at me, jaw clenched. If you're going to be like this, he said, maybe we shouldn't live together. My heart jumped, and for a second I almost felt relief. Then he added, but I need time to figure things out. Of course. There it was. The trap. He wanted to threaten leaving, but only on his schedule, only when he had a landing pad. I took a breath. Fine, I said. Let's talk logistics. He blinked. What? We have a lease, I said. It's in my name. It renews in a couple months. We need to decide what we're doing. He stared like I'd spoken another language. We'll figure it out, he said, brushing it off. No, I said, and my voice was steady now. We're figuring it out. Over the next few weeks, I did what I always do when my life feels out of control. I made lists. I looked at apartments online. I checked my savings. I compared commutes. I calculated what I could afford if I lived alone in a smaller place. I didn't tell him at first because I didn't want him to sabotage it with charm or guilt, and also because I wasn't sure I could follow through. One afternoon, I came home early and found his laptop open on the table. I wasn't trying to snoop. It was just there, and an email was open, and the subject line had the words, "Interview opportunity." My heart lifted for half a second, because despite everything, a part of me still wanted him to get his life together. Then I read the email. It was a polite rejection. He'd turned down the interview. There was another email, and another. He'd been offered positions, not glamorous ones, but real ones, and he'd declined them because they were beneath him. I stood there staring at the screen, feeling my stomach twist. When he came out of the bedroom and saw me, he froze. "Why are you on my laptop?" he snapped. "It was open," I said, and my voice was calm in a way that surprised me. "You turned down interviews." He scoffed. "Those jobs were a joke." "They were jobs," I said. "You told everyone you were applying. You told my parents. You told me. You lied." He rolled his eyes. "I didn't lie. I'm waiting for something better." "How long?" I asked, and my voice cracked, because anger and sadness were colliding in my throat. "How long were you planning on waiting while I paid for everything?" He opened his mouth, then closed it, then said, "You're acting like I forced you." That sentence made my blood boil. "No," I said slowly. "You didn't force me. You just let me. You let me drown while you floated." He glared, and for the first time I saw something ugly behind his charm. "You think you're so much better than me?" he hissed. "I think I'm tired," I said. That night, I emailed my landlord and asked about not renewing. My lease had about 2 months left, and the landlord had already sent the usual renewal notice, the boring official thing that felt like a clock ticking. I printed it out and left it on the counter the next morning, because I wanted my boyfriend to see it. I wanted him to understand that my decisions were not theoretical anymore. He saw it and said casually, "So we renew, right?" I took a breath. "No," I said. "I'm not renewing." He laughed like I was joking. "What?" "I'm moving," I said. "I'm getting a smaller place. Just for me." His face went blank. "You can't do that." "I can," I said. "The lease is in my name." He stood there, mouth slightly open, like a person watching a door close. "Where am I supposed to go?" he demanded. "I don't know," I said, and it was the first time I'd allowed myself to say that without guilt. "You're an adult." He stared at me like I'd betrayed him. "You're doing this because you're mad." "I'm doing this because I'm done," I said. He started pacing, hands in his hair, voice rising. "You can't just leave me like that." "I'm not leaving you," I said, and I hated how defensive it sounded, like I still needed to justify myself. "We're roommates, remember? Roommates move when it's convenient." He slammed his fist lightly against the counter, not hard enough to be scary, but hard enough to be dramatic. "You're cruel," he said. "That's what my mother said," I said quietly. He froze. "You told your mother?" "No," I said. "You did. You called them. You made them think I'm the villain." He opened his mouth to argue, then shut it, because he knew it was true. The next day, my phone blew up with messages from my mother and my father. "Call us. We need to talk. Don't do anything stupid." Stupid. Like moving out of a situation where I was being used was stupid. I didn't answer. 2 days later, my father showed up at my apartment, unannounced, which is his signature move when he wants to intimidate me. He stood in my doorway, looking past me into my living room like he owned the place. "Can we talk?" he asked. "No," I said, because I was trying to be brave. My voice shook anyway. "I hate that. I hate when my body betrays me." He sighed like I was being unreasonable. "Your mother is worried," he said. "You're making a mess." "I'm cleaning up a mess," I corrected. He stepped inside without waiting for permission. "You don't throw people away," he said, and I almost laughed because my father has thrown away relationships like receipts. My boyfriend appeared from the bedroom, suddenly polite. "Sir," he said, and he shook my father's hand, and my father's face softened in that way that always made me feel invisible. They talked like two men handling a hysterical woman's problem. I stood there feeling my cheeks burn. My father turned to me. "You're going to renew the lease," he said. "No," I said, and I surprised myself with how firm it sounded. "I'm not." My father's jaw tightened. "Then you're going to let him stay until he finds a place." "No," I said again. He has 2 months. He can figure it out. My father's eyes narrowed. So you're choosing pride over family? I laughed, short and sharp. He's not family, I said. And if he is, that says more about you than me. My father's face reddened. Watch your mouth. No, I said, and my voice rose, and I could feel myself slipping into that old fight or flight. I'm done being polite while everyone uses me. My father took a step toward me, and for a second I felt small, like a kid again. Then I remembered I was in my own apartment. I remembered I paid for the door he'd just walked through. You need to leave, I said. He stared at me like he couldn't believe I'd said it. Excuse me? You need to leave, I repeated. Now. My boyfriend shifted uncomfortably, like he hadn't expected me to stand up to my father. My father looked at him, then at me, and something cold settled in his expression. Fine, he said, but don't come crying to us when you ruin your life. He walked out. My boyfriend watched him go with this helpless look, and then he turned to me and said, Why would you do that? He was trying to help. Help. I stared at him. Help you, I said. Not me. He threw his hands up. Everything is always about you. I laughed, and tears sprang to my eyes at the same time. Oh my God, I said. This is literally about my apartment, my money, my life. He looked away, jaw clenched. You're impossible. Maybe I was. But I was also done. That weekend, I went apartment hunting and signed for a smaller place not far from my office. 1 bedroom, nothing fancy, just clean and mine. I didn't tell my family. I didn't tell anyone except one coworker who I trusted enough to not turn it into a lecture. I started packing slowly, in secret, like I was planning an escape. My boyfriend's mood shifted between angry and sweet. Some days sulky, slamming cabinets. Other days making dinner, acting normal. That messed with my head most, made me second guess. Then he'd say something about how I owe him time or shouldn't ruin his future, and the spell would break. About a month before the lease ended, he came into the living room holding his phone. My parents said I can come home. I felt a rush of relief so intense it almost knocked me over. Okay, I said carefully. So you'll move out? He hesitated. They want me to move immediately, but I told them I'd rather stay here until the lease ends. Of course he did. A week later, he tried flowers from the grocery store, the cheap kind that looked like apology bouquets. I've been thinking, he said softly. I miss us. I was confused. I was stressed. I said stupid things. I love you. I remembered the group chat, the shrug, the way he'd called my parents, the interviews he'd turned down. I looked at him and felt nothing, just tired. Interesting timing, I said. His face fell. What does that mean? It means you didn't miss me when I was paying your bills and cooking your dinners, I said. You miss me now that you're about to lose your housing. He flinched. That's not fair. It's accurate, I said, and I put the flowers on the counter like they were trash. He walked away angry. The family kept trying too. We're ashamed. You're burning bridges. My brother even asked if I could help with his rent since I was throwing him out anyway. I didn't answer any of them. 2 weeks before the lease ended, my boyfriend and I got into the worst fight yet. It started over detergent and escalated fast. He stood in the doorway, eyes hard. You're not a partner. You're controlling. Controlling. I felt my hands shake. I'm controlling because I won't keep paying for you? You liked paying for me, he said, voice sharp. You liked feeling superior. I stared at him. You think I liked losing sleep because my account kept shrinking? You think I liked feeling used? He shrugged. You chose it. I walked toward him, body shaking with rage. And now I'm unchoosing it. He stepped back, then forward, then started talking over me, voice rising. The apartment felt too small, the air too thick. He was crowding me, backing me toward the wall, and my nervous system screamed. I grabbed my phone and called building security. The building had basic security, just a guy who walked around at night checking doors. Nothing fancy. When my boyfriend heard me on the phone, he froze. Are you serious? He hissed. Back up, I said, and my voice was shaking. Just back up. The security guy came up, stood in the doorway, asked if everything was okay. My boyfriend suddenly got calm, because of course he did, because he's great at performing for men in authority. We're fine, he said smoothly. Just a misunderstanding. I wanted to scream. I just nodded and said, I'm okay. After the guy left, my boyfriend stared at me like I'd betrayed him. You made me look crazy, he said. You made me feel unsafe, I said quietly. He wasn't hitting me, but he was crowding me. I felt trapped. He scoffed. You're so dramatic. I looked at him and said, maybe, but I'd rather be dramatic than trapped. After that, he started sleeping on the couch more. The apartment became this tense, shared space where we avoided each other, passing like strangers. I packed faster. I labeled boxes. I moved my important documents to my car because I didn't trust him anymore. Move-out day came like a relief and a heartbreak at the same time. The movers showed up, and my boyfriend sat on the couch watching like he was a guest at his own eviction. He kept making comments like, "I can't believe you're doing this," and "This is so unnecessary," like the years were some sacred thing he hadn't already tossed aside when he decided he didn't love me. At one point, he followed me into the bedroom and said, "If you walk out with those boxes, that's it." I looked at him. "It's been it," I said. His eyes filled with tears, and for a split second I wondered if he was actually hurting. Then he said, "You'll never find someone who puts up with you." And there it was. The real weapon. The thing he'd been holding back until the last second. I felt my throat tighten, but I refused to cry in front of him. "I'd rather be alone than be used," I said. He scoffed, wiped his eyes, and walked away like I was the cruel one. When the last box was loaded into the moving truck, I took one final look at the apartment. The lease officially ended in 3 days, and I'd scheduled the final walkthrough for that date. I kept my key until then, because I knew I'd need to come back one more time to make sure everything was clean and ready for inspection. I couldn't risk losing my security deposit because he decided cleaning wasn't his problem. I drove to my new apartment with my car following the moving truck, and when I unlocked the door and stepped inside, the silence felt different. It wasn't lonely. It was peaceful. 3 days later, I went back to the old place for the final walkthrough. I showed up on a weekday after work, hair in that defeated bun, carrying cleaning supplies like a woman going to war with a sponge. The apartment looked like a grown man had been living there alone and resenting every chore. Cups in the sink with that cloudy water smell. Random piles of laundry like the floor was a closet. He came out of the bedroom looking surprised. "Why are you here?" "For the walkthrough," I said. "We need to clean." He frowned. "You moved out. Why is that my problem?" I stared at him. "Because you lived here," I said slowly. "And because the deposit is in my name." He laughed. "So you're here to clean up after me again?" I wanted to throw the bottle of cleaner at his head. Instead, I said, "No, I'm here because I'm not letting you cost me more money." He leaned against the wall and watched me like it was a show. "You're still obsessed with money. And you're still allergic to effort," I shot back. He didn't lift a finger. He just hovered, making comments, occasionally trying to bring up the good times. I scrubbed that apartment until it passed inspection, turned in my keys to the landlord's office, signed the final paperwork, and walked out without looking back. A week later, the landlord's office emailed me about the deposit. Within hours, my boyfriend was texting me. "So you'll send me my half, right?" Half. He had the audacity to call it his half like he'd paid anything up front. I wrote back, "There is no half. It was my deposit." He replied instantly, "Wow, you really are cold." I sent back, "Stop contacting me." Then I blocked his number because I finally understood that closure is just a word people use when they want one last shot at your attention. Blocking him didn't stop my family from becoming his delivery system. My mother sent messages like, "He says you stole money from him, and you need to clear your name." My sister sent a voice message about being the bigger person because he's struggling, and Mom is stressed, and it's not worth tearing the family apart. That sentence made my hands shake. It was always on me to be the bigger person, to swallow things, to keep the peace. The next morning, I went to work and tried to act normal. Around lunchtime, I got a call from our building's front desk. "There's someone here asking for you. He says he's your father." I felt my face flush. "Tell him I'm in a meeting. Tell him I can't come down." There was a pause. "He's insistent." I closed my eyes. "I'll be right there." I went down to the lobby. There he was, standing near the security desk. He couldn't get past security into the actual office floors, but he'd positioned himself where I'd have to face him. "What are you doing here?" I hissed when I stepped outside. "You're humiliating your mother," he said, loud enough that people glanced over. "I'm not doing this here," I said. "Go home." He stepped closer, talking about fixing it and people asking questions. When he snapped that this was why men leave me, something in me went still, because I realized he knew exactly where to aim. "Get out of my work building," I said, and my voice was quiet but solid. He stared at me like he wanted a fight, then turned and walked away because he didn't get the reaction he came for. I stood there shaking, forced myself to breathe, and went back inside like nothing happened. That incident pushed me into making my boundaries real. I stopped answering family messages that weren't neutral. I didn't argue. I didn't defend. I didn't explain. I just stepped back. My ex tried to reach out a few more times, but he couldn't text my blocked number, so he sent emails from a new address. Can we talk? I miss you. I just want closure. I deleted them without responding. My life got quieter. My phone stopped buzzing with arguments. My bank account stopped bleeding. I started sleeping through the night. I stopped flinching when I heard someone open a cabinet. I started cooking again. Simple things, just for me. My family stayed cold. My mother stopped calling. My father sent one message. We're disappointed. My sister sent a passive-aggressive note about how relationships take work. My brother sent another request for money. I didn't answer any of them. I started going to a weekend walking group because I needed to be around people who weren't my family. That's where I met someone new, a nurse. He wasn't flashy. He wasn't charming in a performative way. He was just solid. One Saturday morning, we stopped at a coffee shop after the walk. The group had dispersed, but he'd asked if I wanted to grab something warm before heading home. We sat by the window with our drinks, and he talked about his job, how he'd had a rough week with a patient who'd coded twice but pulled through. That's intense, I said. He shrugged. It's the job. But it matters, you know? Like, I can see the difference I make. I nodded. I don't get that in software. I fix things and nobody notices unless they break again. He smiled. Somebody notices. You just don't get to see it. He asked me questions, real ones, not the kind people ask when they're waiting for their turn to talk. When I told him a simplified version of what had happened, he didn't interrupt. He just listened. When I finished, he said, "That sounds exhausting. I'm glad you got out." Nobody in my family had ever said they were glad I chose myself. He paid for his own coffee without making a big deal about it. He didn't try to pay for mine. He just treated me like an equal. When we walked out, he said, "Same time next week?" "Yeah," I said, and I smiled, and it felt real. About 2 months after I moved, my brother showed up at my new place. He'd somehow gotten the address from my mother. He knocked like he owned the door. "So you're really doing this? You're really cutting everyone off?" I stared at him. "Hi to you too." He sighed dramatically. "Mom is freaking out. Dad says you're being childish." I laughed. Childish? For not paying for a grown man who didn't love me, and for not letting you guilt me into funding your life too? His face hardened. "You think you're better than us?" "No," I said. "I think I'm tired of being your safety net." He stepped closer, voice lower. "You know they might change their will, right?" There it was, the inheritance threat. I felt a strange calm. "Let them," I said. He blinked. "What?" "Let them," I repeated. "If their love is conditional on me sacrificing myself, then it's not love. It's a transaction." He scoffed. "You're being dramatic." I smiled. "I know, and it's working." He stood there stunned, then turned and left, muttering about how I'd regret it. I closed my door and felt lighter. I wish I could say everything wrapped up neatly after that. It didn't. My mother still tells people her daughter abandoned family values. My father still acts like I'm a disappointment. My sister still posts perfect pictures on social media. My brother still finds ways to ask for money through other people. And me? I still have days when I look at my bank statement and feel anger at how much I spent supporting someone who didn't deserve it. I still have moments when I hear, "You're too sensitive," and my chest tightens. I still catch myself apologizing for taking up space. But I also have nights in my little apartment where the silence feels safe, not empty. I have weekends where I walk with that group and laugh until my stomach hurts. I have someone in my life now who doesn't treat my stability like it's a service, who doesn't confuse my competence with consent to be used. And when my phone buzzes with a message from my mother or an email from my ex, I don't feel panic anymore. I feel a choice. I don't need them to understand. I don't need their validation. I just need to be. And slowly, I'm learning how.